The automatic detention hit fast, hard, and public. Nate Cole had barely stepped off the jet bridge before two uniformed airport police cut across the flow of passengers like knives through cloth. One moved ahead of him, blocking the corridor. The other came in from the side, hand already on the snap of his holster, eyes cold and practiced. Behind them, the glass walls of Terminal C reflected the scene in 100 angles. Faces turning, phones coming up, a ripple of attention traveling backward through the line. "Sir, you need to come with us." Nate stopped with the obedient stillness of someone who understood exactly how little his body language could save him. He was 38, tall, lean, in a charcoal suit with no tie. A worn leather carry-on bag hung from his shoulder. His face held the tired calm of long flights and longer days. His skin was dark enough to make him visible before he spoke, and the officer's attention had locked onto him with the specificity of a target. "I'm connecting," Nate said. His voice carried no aggression, no pleading. "What's the issue?" Officer Ralston, the one in front, held a printed paper like it was a warrant. "Random secondary screening. You're flagged. Come on." "Flagged by who?" "Don't play games," Ralston said. "Hands where I can see them. Now." The corridor tightened with the weight of eyes. A woman holding a toddler pulled her child closer. A man in a business shirt paused mid-step, watching with a half-smirk like the terminal had provided a distraction. Nate slowly shifted the carry-on strap off his shoulder, placing the bag at his feet. The movement was careful, deliberate, the kind that came from training or survival. He lifted both hands to chest height. Open palms. No sudden angles. Officer Medina stepped in close behind him. "Turn around." Nate turned. Plastic cuffs snapped shut around his wrists with a sharp click that echoed in the narrow jet bridge. Medina's hands were hard and fast, yanking Nate's arms back just enough to force the shoulders to comply. Pain lanced down the tendons. Nate's jaw tightened once, then he released it. "Is this necessary?" he asked, and the question landed like a controlled test, not a complaint. "It is when you people start acting up," Ralston said, loud enough for the corridor to hear. "We get one chance to keep this place safe." Nate's eyes shifted, taking in the nearest camera dome on the ceiling, the nearest emergency exit sign, the line of sight down to the gate agent's desk. He made no sudden moves, but his mind was already drawing a map. They walked him off the jet bridge in a tight formation like he was a violent offender, not a passenger with the boarding pass folded in his pocket. Every few steps, Ralston's hand tugged Nate's upper arm, jerking him forward as if to remind him he was owned for the moment. The gate agent stood frozen behind her counter, mouth slightly open. Nate met her eyes briefly. Not a plea, just recognition. "Ma'am," Nate said calmly, "could you call my airline and tell them I've been detained?" "My flight?" Ralston shoved him, shoulder into Nate's back. "Shut up. You don't get to give instructions." Nate stumbled a half step. He caught himself without falling. The humiliation was precise, tailored for an audience. The officer steered him away from the main concourse, toward a corridor marked "Authorized Personnel Only." A card reader beeped. The door swung open on a sterile hallway that smelled like disinfectant and old carpet. The bustle of the terminal faded behind them. The air turned colder. At the end of the hall, a small room waited white walls, a metal table bolted to the floor, two chairs, one camera in the corner with a red light that wasn't on. The room looked like it had been built for compliance. They pushed Nate into the chair, forcing him down. Medina yanked the cuffs forward and clipped them to a metal ring under the table. Nate's wrists rotated uncomfortably. He adjusted his breathing, slow and controlled. Ralston leaned in close, breath stale with coffee. "What's in the bag?" "My clothes. A laptop. A notebook." "Any weapons?" "No." "Any cash?" "Some." Ralston's mouth curled. "How much is some, Nate?" Nate's gaze flicked the paper in Ralston's hand again. It wasn't an airport form. It looked like a printout from a system. Names. Codes. A line highlighted in yellow. Nate's name. "How do you know my name?" Nate asked. Ralston slapped the paper against the table. "Don't worry about what I know." Medina opened the carry-on on the table. He moved through it with exaggerated care, like he was handling explosives. He lifted the laptop, turned it over, held it up to the fluorescent light. He flipped through Nate's notebook, pages filled with neat block handwriting and short lists that meant nothing to strangers. Ralston circled behind Nate, speaking to him from an angle where Nate couldn't fully see his face. Where you coming from? Dallas. Where you going? Los Angeles. What's your job? Nate paused just long enough to make the question heavier. Consulting. Ralston laughed. Consulting. Ralston laughed. Consulting. That's good. Consulting on what? How to look innocent? Nate didn't answer. Ralston's tone sharpened. You're traveling under a name that's been flagged. You got a one-way ticket purchased 20 hours ago. Minimal luggage. No checked bags. That's not business travel. That's a pattern. It's a pattern you've decided, Nate said quietly. Ralston slammed his palm on the table hard enough to make the notebook jump. Don't get slick with me. You are in my house now. There it was. Not procedure. Possession. Medina pulled a small toiletry kit free. He unzipped it. Toothbrush. Razor. A small tube of ointment. He dug deeper and removed a narrow black case. He held it up. What's this? Nate's eyes narrowed slightly. Medical. Ralston stepped in front, snatched the case. He popped it open. Inside were 2 syringes sealed in sterile packaging and a compact vial with a label in tight black print. Ralston whistled. Look at that. Medical, huh? What kind of medical? Nate's voice stayed even. Prescribed? Prescribed by who? Ralston asked. Where's your prescription? In my wallet. Ralston held Nate's wallet just out of reach, thumb flicking through cards with casual disrespect. A driver's license. A credit card. A folded credential card with a simple emblem. Ralston paused. His eyes caught on it for a fraction of a second too long. The emblem meant something, but he didn't let it show. He continued flipping, pulled out cash, counted it, then tossed it back like it was dirty. Listen, Ralston said, voice lowering, becoming intimate. We're going to do this the easy way. You're going to tell me what you're carrying, who you work for, and why your name shows up where it does. Or what? Nate asked. Ralston leaned closer until his face was inches away. Or you're going to sit in here until your flight is gone. Then you're going to miss your connection. Then you're going to get rebooked, and you'll sit in holding because you refuse to cooperate. Then we call federal. You want federal? You want some alphabet boys in here with you? Because I can make that happen. Nate stared at him. The calm on his face was not surrender. It was assessment. Am I under arrest? Nate asked. Ralston's smile widened, thin and pleased. You are detained. For what? Suspicion. Suspicion of what? Ralston tapped the paper. You know. Nate's eyes held steady. Then charge me or release me. Medina snorted. Look at him. He got the script down. Ralston's gaze hardened. You think you're special because you can talk like a lawyer? I've seen your type. You come through here thinking rules protect you. They don't. Not in a place like this. He stepped back, nodded at Medina. Search him. Medina's hands went to Nate's pockets with unnecessary force, patting him down, fingers digging. Nate flinched once when Medina pressed too hard against his ribs. Medina noticed and pressed again, enjoying the reaction. Nate's breathing remained controlled, but his eyes shifted, something cold passing behind them, something that didn't match the obedient posture. Medina pulled Nate's phone out and held it up. Password. Nate didn't answer. Ralston sighed like a parent dealing with a stubborn child. Password, Nate. Nate's voice stayed low. I'm not consenting to a search of my device without a warrant. Ralston laughed sharply. Warrant. He said warrant. He turned to Medina. You hear that? He thinks he's in court. He leaned down, eyes close to Nate's. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me that password, and you're going to make my day easy. Or I'm going to hold you until you get tired. I can keep you in that chair for hours. You want to miss your flight? You want to miss your whole life? Nate's jaw tightened again. He swallowed once. You don't have the authority, Nate said. Ralston's face went still. Then his hand came up fast and cracked across Nate's cheek. The sound was small and vicious, a slap that carried more humiliation than pain. Nate's head snapped to the side. His cheek reddened. He blinked once. Twice. The cuffs clinked as his wrists tensed instinctively against the metal ring. Medina watched with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Ralston spoke softly now. Authority is what I say it is in this room. Nate's eyes returned to him, steady, dark, and suddenly sharper. He didn't threaten. He didn't raise his voice, but something shifted in the air. A slight change in pressure, like the room had become aware. "You recording this?" Nate said, glancing toward the camera dome in the corner. Ralston followed his gaze and scoffed. "That thing doesn't work." Nate's expression didn't change. "Then you won't mind turning it on." Ralston stepped toward it, lifted his middle finger at the camera. "There, it's on." Nate looked at him for a long moment, then spoke as if delivering an instruction he expected to be followed. "Call your supervisor," Nate said. Ralston's smile returned. "You're going to tell me who you are, and then I'll decide who I call." Nate's eyes moved to the paper again. He saw a code near his name. He saw the kind of code that didn't belong in an airport police printout. He saw the source line. A system they weren't trained to access. "How did you get that watch list printout?" Nate asked. Medina's grin faltered slightly. "What?" Ralston's gaze flicked to Medina. He recovered fast. "We have access." Nate nodded slowly, like he was confirming something. "No, you don't." Ralston's hand grabbed Nate's chin, forcing his face up. "You're gonna stop talking." Nate's eyes met his. "You shouldn't have printed that." The sentence was quiet, almost gentle. It landed wrong. It wasn't fear. It wasn't defiance. It was a statement of consequence. Ralston released him, suddenly irritated. He paced once, then turned back. "Fine. We'll do it another way." He nodded at Medina again. "Bring in the kit." Medina opened a cabinet in the corner and pulled out a small black bag. The zipper sounded too loud in the sterile room. He set it on the table, opened it to reveal swabs, plastic evidence bags, a portable fingerprint scanner, the kind of kit that made detention feel like accusation. Ralston leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "We're going to collect some samples, compare you, confirm who you are." Nate's eyes narrowed. "You don't have probable cause." Ralston shrugged. "I have suspicion. And I have a city that expects me to keep them safe. Now hold still." Medina grabbed Nate's hand, forced his fingers open, swabbed under his nails with rough circular motions. Nate's shoulders tightened. The humiliation turned physical. As Medina worked, Ralston watched Nate like he was watching prey settle into a trap. "So," Ralston said, "conversational. You fly a lot, Nate?" Nate didn't answer. Ralston continued anyway. "You ever been stopped before? You ever had to explain yourself? Bet you have. Guys like you. Always got an attitude about it. Always want to make it about race." Nate's eyes flicked up. "You're already making it about race." Ralston chuckled. "Look at that. He wants to talk sociology. You want to be a victim? I can give you victim." Medina pressed the swab harder, twisting. Nate's fingers clenched involuntarily. Ralston leaned in again. "Tell me the password." Nate's mouth opened slightly, like he was about to speak. Then he closed it. Medina finished swabbing and reached for the fingerprint scanner. He grabbed Nate's right hand and forced it onto the glass. The machine beeped once, then again. A red light flashed. Medina frowned. "It's not reading." Ralston glanced over, annoyed. "Try again." Medina tried again. The scanner beeped. The red light flashed again. "It says, unavailable." Ralston's face tightened. "Unavailable?" Medina turned the screen slightly. "It's not pulling from the system." Ralston scoffed. "Then you're not in the system. That's worse." Nate spoke quietly, almost to himself. "Or you're not in the right system." Ralston's eyes snapped to him. "What did you say?" Nate looked at him with calm certainty. "Nothing you can fix by hitting me." Ralston's fist slammed on the table again. "You think you're untouchable." Nate didn't answer. But his breathing had changed. It was slower now, heavier, like a countdown. Ralston stood, pushed his chair back. "Medina, step out. I want a minute with him." Medina hesitated. "You sure?" Ralston's gaze hardened. "Now." Medina left, the door closing with a hollow click that made the room feel sealed. Ralston walked around the table and stopped behind Nate, close enough that his uniform brushed the back of Nate's suit jacket. "You ever wonder why people like you get stopped?" Ralston murmured. His voice was low, almost confidential. "It's because you're always hiding something. Always. The airport is where liars come to move." Nate's eyes stared straight ahead. The veins in his wrists stood out against the cuffs. Ralston leaned down until his mouth was near Nate's ear. "Tell me what you are." Nate's voice was barely above a whisper. "Not yours." Ralston's face twisted. He grabbed Nate's hair at the back of his head and yanked, pulling Nate's head back. Nate's neck arched. Pain flashed across his face for a second, then disappeared behind control. Ralston hissed, "You want to play silent? Fine." He released Nate abruptly, then stepped toward the door. He opened it and called out, "Medina, bring the supervisor. And bring the TSA manager. We're escalating." Nate's eyes closed for a brief second as if he was calculating the cost of what came next. When he opened them again, they were focused. Ralston turned back into the room, satisfaction tightening his mouth. "We're going to break you down until you tell us who you are. And when you do, you're going to regret how long you waited." Nate watched him. Then, slowly, he shifted his cuffed hands upward, as far as the ring would allow. He reached toward his jacket pocket with careful fingers, limited by the cuffs. Ralston moved fast, slapping Nate's hands back down. "No." Nate looked at him. "In my inside pocket is a card." Ralston's eyes narrowed. "You don't get to reach for anything." "It's a credential," Nate said. "If you read it, you'll stop." Ralston laughed. "You think you can flash a card at me? What is it, huh? Some fake badge from a security company?" Nate's voice stayed even, but a new weight pressed behind it. "If you keep going, your career ends in this room." Ralston leaned forward, face inches away. "If you keep threatening me, you'll end in a cell." Nate didn't blink. "Read it." Ralston held his stare, then reached into Nate's jacket himself with theatrical force, fingers digging like he was searching for contraband. He pulled out the credential card Nate had indicated. The card was plain, no flashy badge, no thick gold seal. It had a subdued eagle watermark and a line of text in small print. It looked almost boring, intentionally so. The kind of thing meant to be overlooked by anyone who didn't know. Ralston's eyes skimmed it. His mouth twitched. He read it again. His expression shifted not into fear, but into anger at being challenged. He shoved the card down on the table. "Cute," Ralston said. "You carry a fake Fed card. That's a felony." "It isn't fake," Nate said. Ralston waved it. "Then what are you? FBI? DEA? You don't look like." He stopped himself mid-sentence. The words had slipped too close to the truth of what he meant. Nate's eyes stayed on him. "You don't know what I look like because you don't know what you're looking at." Ralston's hand tightened on the card. He glanced at the small line of text again. A number, a name, a contact code. He scoffed and tossed it back toward Nate. "I'm not calling some number on a card you printed at home." Nate's voice dropped. "Then call airport operations and ask them what Gray Finch means." Ralston froze for half a second. The term was casual, like a bird name, like nothing. But it hit Ralston wrong. He recovered with the bark of laughter. "Gray Finch. Jesus, you watch too many movies." Nate didn't smile. "Call." Ralston stared at him. Then the door opened. A woman stepped in. Short hair, crisp blazer, TSA badge clipped to her belt. Her nameplate read, L.K. Lee and Sid. Behind her came a man in a white shirt with captain's bars on his shoulders. Airport Police Sergeant Vickers' face already annoyed by the inconvenience. Vickers took in the room, the cuffs. Nate's cheek reddened. He looked at Ralston with a tired expression. "Ralston, what is this?" Ralston stood straighter, like a kid caught misbehaving. "Sergeant, we got a flag on this passenger. Suspicious travel pattern. He's refusing to cooperate. He's carrying syringes, unknown vial. Possible narcotics. Possible terror link." Klein's eyes shifted to Nate. They lingered on the cuffs. Her mouth tightened slightly. Professional, but not blind. Nate looked at Vickers. "Sergeant, am I being charged with anything?" Vickers hesitated, glancing at Ralston. "He's detained pending investigation." Nate nodded slowly. "Then I'm requesting a supervisor from your chain of command and legal counsel." Ralston rolled his eyes. "He's playing the game." Nate turned his face slightly so Vickers could see the red mark on his cheek. "He struck me." Vickers' eyes narrowed. "Ralston." Ralston's jaw tightened. He got mouthy. Klein stepped closer to the table, noticing the printed wash list paper. Her eyes went to it. She stiffened. "What is that?" she asked. Ralston waved it dismissively. "System printout." Klein's voice sharpened. "That's not TSA system." Vickers leaned in, eyes scanning the header, his brow furrowed. Where did you get this? Ralston's confidence wavered, just a fraction. It came to intel. Klein looked at Nate again, more carefully now, as if the room had changed. Mr. Moore. Cole, do you have identification beyond? Nate tilted his chin toward the credential card. It's there. Klein picked it up, read it. Her eyes widened slightly, then tightened, as if she was forcing herself not to react. Vickers watched her. What is it? Klein didn't answer immediately. Her fingers flipped the card over, found the number, and without looking at Ralston, she pulled out her phone. Ralston's head snapped. Hey, you don't need to call some. Klein's gaze cut him off. Quiet. She dialed. The room filled with the sound of ringing. Once. Twice. A voice answered on the second ringcom, male, controlled. Klein turned slightly away, speaking low, but the tension in her posture made it visible. This is TSA Manager Klein at Terminal C, she said. I have a passenger detained by airport police. I have a credential with the code Gray Finch. I need verification. The voice on the other end responded. Klein's face went still. Yes, she said, then swallowed. Yes, he's in cuffs. Yes, there's physical injury. She listened again. Her eyes flicked up to Vickers. Sergeant, we need to uncuff him, now. Ralston's face tightened. What? No. We're in the middle of... Klein's voice rose just enough to carry. Now. Vickers hesitated, then stepped toward Medina, who had re-entered behind them and lingered in the doorway. Medina, uncuff him. Ralston's eyes widened. Sergeant, you can't just... Vickers held up a hand. Ralston, step back. Ralston didn't move. He's a suspect. Klein's voice was low, dangerous. He's not your suspect. Ralston's face flushed. What's that supposed to mean? Klein ended the call and placed her phone on the table like a gavel. It means he's here under federal authority, and you just assaulted him. The room went silent in a way that made the fluorescent hum sound like a scream. Nate stayed seated. He didn't rub his wrists. He didn't stand. He let them come to him. Vickers' hand moved to the cuffs. Medina hesitated, fingers hovering like he was afraid of touching a live wire. Vickers took the key and unlocked them himself. The plastic cuffs loosened and fell away. Nate's wrists were marked, red rings with slight bruising. He flexed his hands slowly, rolling the pain out with controlled movements. Ralston's voice cracked with anger. So what? He's some Fed informant? That doesn't mean he... Nate stood up, not abruptly, but with a deliberate, measured motion that made the room feel smaller. He straightened his suit jacket. He looked at Ralston with calm, surgical focus. Klein spoke first, voice tight. Mr. Cole? Nate raised a hand slightly, stopping her, not rudely. Just decisively, he addressed Vickers. Sergeant, I want your officers' names and badge numbers. Ralston scoffed. Oh, now he wants names. Nate's eyes never left Ralston. You'll give them, and you'll preserve every piece of footage from the jet bridge, the hallway, and this room. Vickers' throat bobbed. Yes, sir. Ralston's head snapped toward him. Sir? What the hell? Nate turned slightly, pulling his phone from the table where Medina had placed it. He didn't unlock it. He simply held it, thumb resting on the side. He spoke quietly, as if the air itself was listening. He accessed a restricted watch list system and printed it. That alone is a federal offense. He also physically assaulted me while I was detained without probable cause. There are witnesses in the terminal. There's footage, and there is the paper. Ralston's mouth opened, then shut. His eyes darted to the printout on the table like it had become evidence against him instead of power. Medina shifted in the doorway, suddenly uncertain where to place his hands. Klein's voice softened, almost respectful. Mr. Cole, I'm sorry. We weren't informed. Nate didn't look at her yet. That's the point. He finally turned to Klein. You weren't supposed to be informed. But someone in this building is pulling data they shouldn't have, and your officers just made themselves part of it. Vickers swallowed hard. Mr. Cole, who are you? Nate's gaze returned to Ralston, and when he answered, it was not a boast. It was a fact delivered with the cold weight of official reality. Nathaniel Cole, he said, Central Intelligence Agency, under Domestic Liaison Authority, and this detention has compromised an ongoing operation. Ralston laughed once, sharp and desperate. CIA? CIA doesn't operate domestically. That's none. Nate's eyes stayed steady. Liaison. Interagency. Legal. Documents. Ralston's face hardened, refusing to yield. You expect me to believe. Nate lifted his phone and dialed a number from memory, fingers moving without hesitation. He put it on speaker. It rang once. A woman answered, voice crisp. Operations. Nate spoke calmly. This is Cole. Gray Finch credential. I'm detained at Terminal C by airport police. I have a TSA manager and an airport police sergeant present. I need federal response. Now. The woman didn't ask questions. Stay where you are. Response en route. Nate ended the call. The room felt different now. Like gravity had changed direction. Ralston's chest rose and fell. He looked at Vickers as if demanding backup. But Vickers' eyes were on the printout and the credential card, and something like fear had started to crawl into his posture. Klein picked up the watch list paper with 2 fingers like it might contaminate her. Sergeant, she said quietly, this header, this is DHS restricted access. Ralston snapped. I didn't hack anything. It came to us. We got a tip. Nate's voice stayed level. From who? Ralston glared at him. I'm not telling you. Nate stepped closer, stopping just short of the table. He didn't loom, he didn't threaten. But his presence was controlled force. You will, Nate said, because the person feeding you is either compromised or criminal, and you just made yourself their instrument. Ralston's eyes flickered anger-fighting panic. You don't get to interrogate me. Nate's gaze shifted to Vickers again. Sergeant, your officer assaulted a federal operative. He also appears to have access to restricted databases. If you try to cover it, you become part of it. Vickers' face strained. I'm not covering anything. The hallway outside filled with footsteps, synchronized, not the wandering pace of airport staff. Voices, radios, the kind of movement that made people instinctively step aside. 2 men in suits entered first, badges clipped inside their jackets, eyes scanning the room with rapid professional assessment. Behind them came a third taller, older, silver hair, face carved into a permanent expression of restrained impatience. His badge wasn't visible at first. He didn't need it. He carried authority like a weapon. He looked at Nate. Cole. Nate nodded once. Sir. The man's eyes flicked to Nate's bruised wrists, his reddened cheek. The temperature in his gaze dropped. Then he turned to Ralston. Officer, the man said, voice calm. State your name. Ralston straightened, stubbornness in his spine. Officer Daniel Ralston, Airport Police. The man nodded slowly. Daniel Ralston. You detained a credentialed federal liaison and assaulted him. Ralston's jaw clenched. I was doing my job. The man's eyes didn't blink. You abused your job. He turned slightly and one of the suited agents stepped forward, already holding a small device. Special Agent Torres, FBI, the agent said, showing badge briefly. This room is now under federal jurisdiction. No one leaves. Ralston's eyes widened. FBI? For what? This is airport police business. Torres's voice was flat. For obstruction, assault, unauthorized access to federal systems, and potential conspiracy. Medina took a step back, suddenly pale. I was just following. Torres cut him off with a glance. You can explain that later. The older man finally showed his badge, CIA Office of General Counsel Liaison. Not field. Not flashy. The kind of badge that made careers collapse. He looked at Vickers and Klein. I need names. I need footage. I need the printout. I need to know who authorized this. Klein held out the watch list paper with trembling fingers. He had it. He printed it. Vickers' voice cracked. We didn't authorize. He said intel. The older man's gaze pinned Ralston. Who gave you access? Ralston's mouth tightened. I'm not talking without. Torres stepped forward. Without what? A lawyer? Great. We'll get you one. Torres nodded to another agent in the doorway. Homeland Security Investigations, patch visible on his vest. HSI will take custody, Torres said. Cuff him. 2 agents moved in. Real cuffs, this time metal, solid, professional. Ralston backed up instinctively, hands rising. This is ridiculous, he snapped. You can't. The cuffs clicked shut around his wrists with the same finality he'd used on Nate, but without the theater. No shove, no humiliation, just procedure. Ralston's face twisted as reality set in. He's CIA? You believe this? Nate watched, silent, not pleased, not vengeful, just present. Torres spoke to Ralston like reading from a script. You are being detained pending investigation. Anything you say, Ralston barked a laugh, sharp, furious. Detained? Oh, now we use words carefully. Torres's eyes stayed cold. Now we do. Medina stood rigid in the corner, eyes darting. He looked like a man realizing a joke had ended and the bill had arrived. An agent approached Medina next. You too. Turn around. Medina's mouth opened. Wait, I didn't hit him. I didn't. The agent's voice was emotionless. Turn around. Medina complied, shoulders collapsing. The cuffs clicked again. Outside the room, the hallway echoed with more movement. Someone was sealing doors. Someone was calling supervisors. The airport had shifted from routine to crisis. Nate finally spoke to the older CIA counsel liaison. Sir, the person feeding them. The older man cut in softly. We know, this isn't isolated. Nate's eyes sharpened. Then they're not just profiling, they're hunting. The older man nodded once. Exactly. Torres turned to Klein and Vickers. You two are witnesses now. You will provide statements. You will preserve everything. If anything disappears, we will know. Klein's eyes were wet but controlled. Yes, absolutely. Vickers looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Yes. Ralston tried to twist in the cups as if rage could undo metal. This is insane. He's one man. One. The older man's voice was low, lethal. He's not one man. He's an operation you just exposed. And you did it because you wanted power. Ralston's face flushed. I wanted safety. Nate finally spoke, his tone quiet. You wanted control. The agents moved Ralston toward the door. He resisted just enough to make it messy. Torres didn't flinch. Two agents lifted him slightly and guided him out. Ralston's voice rose into the hallway. This is a setup. You can't do this. I was doing my job. His words bounced off sterile walls and died under the weight of boots and radios. Medina was led out next, eyes down. He didn't speak. The room emptied until only Nate, Klein, Vickers, and the older CIA liaison remained. Klein looked at Nate, guilt tight in her face. Mr. Cole, I didn't know. I should have. Nate's gaze held hers for a moment. You saw cuffs on a passenger and a red mark on his face. You didn't need to know anything else. Klein's eyes dropped. She nodded once, swallowing hard. Vickers cleared his throat. Mr. Cole, I'm sorry. I should have stopped it sooner. Nate's voice softened only slightly, the way steel softens when it's tempered. You can still do the right thing. Provide everything. No delays, no missing minutes on footage. Vickers nodded. Yes. The older CIA liaison stepped closer to Nate, lowering his voice. Medical okay? Nate rolled his wrists once, testing pain. Bruising. Nothing broken. The older man's gaze hardened. We're filing. Nate nodded. And the systemic piece? The older man's eyes flicked toward the hallway, toward the airport beyond the door where thousands of people moved unaware. Already in motion. There's a leak. Someone is feeding local enforcement restricted alerts to test response, to identify targets, to see who can be pushed. Nate's face tightened, and they used him. They used his appetite, the older man corrected. People like him don't need to be paid. They need to be empowered. Nate's jaw clenched. He looked at the table where the watch list printout still lay, now in an evidence bag, the papers suddenly fragile under federal scrutiny. The older man spoke again. You were staying for debrief. Nate's eyes shifted toward the terminal. My flight. The older man shook his head. You're not going anywhere until we secure the perimeter. Your cover is burned here. Nate's expression didn't change, but something heavy settled behind his eyes in acceptance that came with the job. Klein stood quietly, hands clasped tight. Is there anything I can do? Nate looked at her. Tell your people the truth, not the convenient version, the one where a man was cuffed first and questioned later. Klein nodded, tears held back by professionalism. I will. The older man stepped to the door and opened it. The hallway was filled with agents now, the air thick with urgency. A man with a camera rig was speaking to another officer. Evidence bags moved hand to hand. Radios murmured in clipped codes. Nate walked out with controlled steps. Heads turned. People made space. Down the hall, Ralston's voice was still echoing, fading as they moved him away. It wasn't the voice of authority anymore. It was the voice of someone watching the world take back what he'd stolen. Hours later, the airport's public-facing side continued announcements, rolling suitcases, passengers asking about delays. But behind the service corridors, a different machine was operating. Federal agents pulled server logs from airport police terminals. They traced the printout to a login that didn't belong to Ralston. They found remote access pings at odd hours. They discovered an officer's workstation had been used as a bridge, a doorway into systems it should never touch. By evening, 2 more airport police officers were escorted out of the building in cuffs, one for selling access credentials, the other for wiping logs. The TSA manager's office was sealed. 3 supervisors were placed on administrative leave. An internal affairs team arrived with boxes and clipboards and faces that didn't care about friendships. News broke quietly at first, then loudly. A cell phone video from the jet bridge. Someone had filmed the cuffs, the shove, the slap. It hit social media with a brutal clarity. People watched Nate's calm face, his hands raised, and they watched an officer strike him anyway. The comments turned into outrage, then pressure, then demands. The airport issued a statement about an incident under investigation. It sounded like everything and nothing. It didn't satisfy anyone. At the federal building downtown, Ralston sat in a small interview room with his wrists cuffed to a ring under a table that looked exactly like the one he'd used. The fluorescent light washed his face pale. He stared at the wall, jaw clenched, trying to hold on to the idea that he was still the man in control. 2 federal prosecutors entered with an investigator. They didn't raise their voices. They didn't posture. They placed a folder on the table. Inside were photos of Nate's bruised wrists, a still frame of the slap captured in high definition, server logs with timestamps, a screenshot of the restricted system header. The investigator spoke calmly. Officer Ralston, you accessed a restricted federal database without authorization. You assaulted a detained individual. You falsified the basis for detention. You attempted to coerce access to a secured device. You acted outside your authority. Ralston sneered. I'm not talking without a lawyer. The prosecutor nodded. You will get one, but you should understand something before you decide what story to tell. She slid another paper across the table. It was a notice of termination. Effective immediately. Signed by the chief. No appeals pending investigation. Ralston's eyes flicked over it. His face twitched. The prosecutor continued, voice steady. You no longer have a badge. You no longer have qualified immunity. You are a private citizen facing federal charges. Ralston's mouth opened. His voice came out rough. Federal? For what? For one slap? The investigator's eyes were flat. For the system you opened. For the people you helped. For the pipeline you revealed. Ralston's anger cracked, and something frantic spilled out. I didn't help anyone. I did my job. They gave me a tip. They said he was dangerous. The prosecutor's pen hovered over her notepad. Who is they? Ralston's jaw clenched. He looked at the camera in the corner, then down at the table. He had spent years believing he could force silence from others. Now silence was crushing him. In another room, Medina sat with a public defender, shoulders collapsed. His voice shook as he described the slap, the cuffs, the printout, the way Ralston had bragged about intel. He tried to wash himself clean with words like orders and pressure. The words didn't work. The tape didn't care. Weeks later, the courtroom was packed, not with spectacle, with consequence. Reporters filled the benches. Community members sat shoulder to shoulder, faces hard and watchful. Airport employees sat together, quiet, eyes down. A row of federal agents stood near the back, unmoving. Ralston sat at the defense table in a suit that didn't fit right, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted papers. He avoided looking at the gallery. He avoided looking at the cameras. Nate Cole sat behind the prosecution table, not in the spotlight, not seeking it. His cheek had healed. His wrists had faded. But his stillness carried a memory that the room felt. The judge entered, older, precise, with a gaze that measured lies like weight. The room rose, then sat. The prosecutor stood. Her voice was clear. This case is not about a mistake. This case is about deliberate abuse of power. The defendant used the authority of his badge as a weapon. He used suspicion as an excuse. He used humiliation as leverage. And he used restricted federal systems he had no right to access. Ralston's attorney tried to object. The judge overruled with a single look. The video played. The jet bridge scene filled the courtroom screen. Nate's hands lifted. The cuffs. The shove. The slap. The sound of it made people flinch even through speakers. Ralston stared at the table as if looking away could erase the image. Witnesses testified. Passengers who had filmed, the gate agent who had watched helplessly, TSA manager Klein whose voice broke once, as she admitted she'd hesitated before dialing the number. Sergeant Bickers testified next, voice hoarse. Officer Ralston did not follow protocol. He did not request proper authorization. He did not document probable cause. He escalated, without justification. Ralston's attorney attempted to paint him as zealous, as overworked, as afraid. The judge listened without sympathy. Then the federal investigator testified about the database. He explained in careful language how a restricted watch list header appearing on local systems was not an accident, how access credentials had been sold, how logs had been wiped, how the airport police department had become a testing ground for corrupt channels. He didn't name the broader operation in open court. Some things stayed sealed, but the implication was visible. This was bigger than one officer. Ralston's face tightened with panic. The idea that he was a pawn, not a king, made him furious. When the verdict came, it wasn't dramatic, it was inevitable. Guilty. On all major counts. Ralston's breath left his body in a sharp exhale. His attorney placed a hand on his arm, but it did nothing. His eyes searched the room for anyone who looked like they believed him. No one did. At sentencing, the judge spoke slowly, each word heavy, each pause a weight placed on the scale. This court has seen many defendants, the judge said, but few have wielded authority with such contempt for the law. You did not protect the public. You endangered it. You used your badge to satisfy your need to dominate, and you justified it with the language of safety. Ralston's face twitched. He tried to shake his head, but his neck wouldn't obey fully. The judge continued. The victim in this case happened to be a federal operative, but that is not what makes this crime serious. What makes it serious is what you would have done if he had been a regular man with no credential, no leverage, and no agency to call. The gallery was silent. The words landed on every person like a truth that didn't need decoration. The sentence was read: years in federal custody, followed by supervised release, permanent loss of certification, a civil rights judgment that would haunt him beyond prison. The judge's gavel struck once. Ralston was taken in handcuffs from the courtroom. Not with swagger, not with noise. With the quiet finality of doors closing. Outside, cameras flashed as he was guided into a vehicle. He tried to look defiant. The expression didn't hold. The world had seen him too clearly. The fallout didn't stop with him. Internal investigations widened. Officers who had shared tips in group chats were subpoenaed. Supervisors who had ignored complaints were questioned. An oversight committee demanded answers about how local enforcement gained access to restricted systems. Federal agencies audited airport security protocols nationwide, quietly hunting for similar breaches. At the airport, new signage went up about civil rights and detention protocols. Body cameras became mandatory in secure corridors. A new complaint hotline was staffed by people who answered calls instead of burying them. None of it erased what happened in that small room, but it changed what could happen next time. In a modest community center near the airport, a public forum was held. Klein stood at the front with a microphone, her hands steady now. She described the moment she realized the system had been abused. She described the call. She described how quickly authority could become cruelty when no one intervened. People listened. Some nodded, some cried quietly. Some stared with hard eyes that had seen this story before, just without cameras. Nate wasn't on stage. He sat near the back, out of the main lights, watching the room like he always watched rooms. He listened to people speak about their own detentions, their own humiliations, their own silence afterward. He didn't interrupt. He didn't defend the system. He let the weight of their words remain intact. Afterward, an older man approached him, hands shaking slightly. "They did that to my son," he said softly. "Years ago, no one cared. Nate met his eyes. Someone cares now. The man nodded, swallowing hard. Because you were CIA. Nate's gaze didn't flinch, because there was proof. The man looked away, pain tightening his face. Proof shouldn't be the price. Nate's voice was quiet. No, it shouldn't. When Nate finally left the community center, the night air was cold and clean. Airport lights glowed in the distance like a separate universe, bright, indifferent, always moving. He walked to his car alone, shoulders squared, posture controlled. The bruise on his wrist was gone, but the memory of plastic biting into skin remained like a phantom sensation. In the end, the justice wasn't loud. It was visible. A badge had been taken from a man who treated it like a weapon. A system had been forced to look at its own blind corridors. People who thought power was private learned what it meant when accountability arrived with paperwork, cameras, and handcuffs that didn't care about excuses. And in the quiet after the verdict, after the statements, after the policy changes and the headlines, the truth remained simple in the way consequences always are. In a room built for compliance, an abuser had tried to make someone smaller. Instead, the room became a mirror, and the man who swung first became the one escorted out last, stripped of his authority, exposed to the same cold procedures he once bent for pleasure, and left with nothing but the sound of his own cuffs closing.